Biggest disagreement with Marcus Garvey is this idea that people are intrinsically religious, right? But where does that come from, right? I believe that humans. So I'll say this: the excellent counterpoint is that I have a son, raising my son without any religion, and he has no religion. He has no imagination in regards to a deity ruling over his life. And even on that notion, you could even see throughout human history the concepts that we have today of a one God phenomenon um, are relatively recent in the course of human history. There were supreme deities, if in a sense, among many in some cultures, but it was not a necessarily universal phenomenon. Notwithstanding that, what we know about humans is not so much that they automatically look for a god or a religion. What we know about humans is that they have overactive imaginations, that they imagine scenarios, and that they imagine people in their waking moments and in their sleep. Uh, they imagine uh, just activities that do not occur. So, what happens with this imagination, and this is where it becomes a little interesting, is to what extent is fantasy and reality uh, different, right? To what extent do fantasy and reality overlap? And that is realistically what the fundamental force of spirituality is. But as far as what we know about religion, we know it, especially as we talk about how culture comes out of politics. When we talk about how culture comes out of politics, what we're discussing is this idea that realistically, that means that culture or religion is a tool that humans use for political formations and political justifications. And we kind of see that throughout different religious texts that we can glean from, including the Abrahamic text, but of course, the ancient Kemetu texts, which describe political formations in their um, in their discourse, right? As for instance, Heru being the embodiment of a king and how a king behaves, i.e., respecting his elders, and Heru has elders that he defers to, but also they tell him that, hey, we're your subordinate. But this is all to say that realistically, humans, at least today, may say, look, fantasy and reality are dichotomized, they're two separate things, but that's not necessarily a thought that doesn't come from a sort of paradigm, a sort of political economic paradigm. Uh, Realistically, religion or spirituality comes from this phenomenon of dreams, this phenomenon of imagination, and imagined justifications, especially for um, for political realities. But mainly, so as to say that spirituality, religion, they are tools that come from the intrinsic human imagination that does not separate, that cannot actually differentiate from reality. So, um, or they are different from reality. That's boss. They are
Right.
different from reality. But what happens with that is, in essence, even though they are different from reality, uh, you cannot see it. You cannot say that firmly without some sort of cultural context. And so what happens is this is another thing that, speaks towards what happens with religion. Let's say you have a dream of somebody, and then a real lived phenomenon happens that justifies that dream. You may seek meaning in that dream. Now, is the dream meaningless or is the dream meaningful? That sort of concern today, in the modern sense, we may say, oh, it's meaningless, right? Today, in the modern sense, we may say, oh, it's meaningless. That's not necessarily true. It's just true in a modern sense. But it's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily a universal truism that was arrived upon by every generation of human history. Now, when you begin to say that uh, dreams can have some reality to them, when you begin to say that, what happens is then when you say that, what that means then is that dreams, um, like when you believe that dreams can have a reality, you now bring it into a scientific realm of experimentation, of justification, of trying to repeat experiments. And when you do that, that's when you have spiritual systems, right? And it's not just dreams, but I couldn't say this. For instance, when my mother passed away, I did have dreams of seeing her in an older form and having conversation with her. And that, it seems to have some sort of meaning in the moment. Now, whether it does or doesn't is not really something anyone can firmly say. And the fact that nobody could firmly say it, that's where the premise for human spirituality comes in, i.e., because you cannot firmly say that it's not something worth exploring, people have explored it. And in people exploring it, that's where you have these developed spiritual systems. You see what I'm saying? It's because of the variety of the human moment and the human experience that people, because something, essentially it's because there are so many people, right? What can be a possibility has, is something that happened, is an occurrence, right? So what can be a possibility happens just by the sake of probability, i.e. that what is realistic or what is probabilistic happens because it's probable. In order to something be probable, it happens, essentially, on a large scale. And what happens with humans is that they are, in fact, a large scale. But that's pretty much it. So I don't necessarily agree with the idea that humans are naturally religious, but humans as imaginative is a thing. And as humans are imaginative, they do form, like they will not necessarily form a religion, They wouldn't necessarily form a religion or a spiritual system, but over the course of generations, and there have been thousands and thousands of generations and billions of people, over the course of that, yes, humans will, some humans will convince themselves of the overlapping of reality and fantasy. And that overlap is something that is natural and inherent to human beings. So hopefully that could be a little bit clarified. And like I said, I'm going to try to publish a book, and put together these sort of thoughts, because beyond spirituality as a allegory for the human experience and the human scientific systems, or the expression of scientific systems, there is a place for imagination. And we know there's a place for imagination because we read books, we watch movies, we watch films, we tell stories. These are articles of imagination.